You know, it's not very often I'm in front of an audience who see me on the far right of a panel. Democracy is the operating system of our society. We often talk about it in the abstract, but it's the way we make decisions, the way we get things done. I'm an engineer by profession. I was also a software developer. And our current version of democracy stops us doing a lot of things. It's the equivalent of a computer operating system that won't let you run an ad blocker, that just lets everything be commercialized. We actually have the same operating system, more or less, that we had when London was the center of a global empire that spanned a quarter of the earth. And that colonial mindset is deeply embedded in those institutions. And speaking as someone who's in power in the northeast of England, please don't take this as any offense, but this audience will probably remember MS-DOS as an operating system. Well, there's some big fans of it, apparently. And that user interface, you have to know the right codes to be able to get in and do anything. That's how British democracy works at the moment. There's a number of ways you can tackle and upgrade an operating system when you're designing it. One of them is called bloatware, where you just add on module after module after module. You don't do anything to restructure the thing from the start. And that is what happens at the moment. If you think of the Shared Prosperity Fund, which replaced European funding in name only, it's only 60% of the money. Well, that has this system where Whitehall says, you're going to get some money. We're not going to tell you the rule for spending it. Can you work up the programs? We want it spent by the end of this year. We developed our program. We hit their deadlines. We had it in July. It was supposed to be spent by the end of March, that financial year. They didn't sign it off to December because the way I did it in power, I said to my team, look, just do something that's good, that works. And I'll stand between you and Whitehall, because I guarantee no one else will have spent the money anyway, and they'll be glad that something's just happened they've got to point to, which is exactly the way it worked. So to finish the tortuous metaphor of operating systems, what we need is open source democracy. That ability for communities, groups, trade unions, businesses to say, we've got this idea, can we use the existing democratic institutions to help this work? If we do that, we can start to change. The other thing we need to talk about in democracy, though, is what's in scope. It's pantomime season. But frankly, I think if you talk to lobby journalists, it's pantomime season all year round. Who's up, who's down? Who spoke out of turn at an event in Scotland, Clive Lewis? All of that sort of stuff is going to be an issue. And it's a false binary. The left, the right, they like to paint it on a spectrum. The big fundamental difference in politics when you talk to people comes down ultimately to one thing when it comes to the administration of public finance. Where do you believe wealth comes from? What do you believe wealth is? There are those who believe that a burgeoning financial sector with rising asset prices is wealth. And then there are those who believe healthy, educated people who feel they have a stake in society where they think the law works for them, people who think that is wealth. And you look at any financial shock, natural disaster through history, the countries that rebound fastest are the ones who've looked after their people, not the ones who've worried about numbers in bank accounts. Since the 2007 crash, we've had a Prime Minister, or around that time, Gordon Brown, a lot of time for Gordon Brown, but Gordon Brown became Prime Minister unelected by the people, had to resign so he couldn't get a coalition. David Cameron was not elected by the people, he got there through a coalition, and he's back again, of course, but he had the Brexit referendum, resigned. Theresa May, unelected by the people, resigned. Boris Johnson, unelected by the people, convicted, then resigned. Liz Truss, that brief acid trip that lasted about 7 weeks, Liz Truss, unelected, resigned. Rishi Sunak, not even elected by his own party, and if there wasn't a general election coming, you know he would have to resign. Why is it that no one can operate even on their own terms? It's because nobody has addressed the fundamental problems since 2007 that have led to austerity, and it's the belief that GDP is more important than well-being, and that's why nobody can deliver a damn thing that works for the people of our countries. I'll give you two examples of what I've done. Not the job creation, not the opening new railway lines, all the big stuff, which is good. One is the adult education budget. This is training welders and chefs, forklift drivers. I got that devolved in 1st of August 2020. And we spoke to the people who deliver courses. We spoke to local businesses and said, if people have done a course, will you guarantee them an interview at the end of it? They said, yeah, we'd love that. We spoke to the people who'd been on courses, and crucially the people who dropped out of courses, and said, what were your barriers? It might be, well, I didn't have Wi-Fi at home, or, well, I've got to pick the kids up, or I've got a 0 hours contract, and I don't know what my hours are from one week to the next, so I can't go on them. We have increased the number of courses delivered from 22,000 a year to 35,000 a year on the same budget by running free flexible courses that work around people's actual barriers. You get a 50%, when was the last time you heard any branch of government get a 50% increase in value for money? And we did it by listening to people, by getting them involved. That's what democracy should be. We work with teachers in the classrooms. We funded a project where teachers can actually be protected and have conversations that go as a team and peer review another school in a different area, affluent to deprived areas, urban to rural areas. One teacher said to me, I've refound my teaching mojo. It's about getting rid of public services being seen as league tables and data and moving it back to the people in the front line who deliver them. So let's move on to today's question. What next? Labour are going to win by default next year. That's my opinion. But let's look underneath that. In Tyne and Wear, actual election results since 21, this is pre-Partygate, when Tories were polling over 40%, to 23, this year's local elections, in absolute terms, the Labour vote fell by 2%. Fewer people voted Labour this year than in 2021. 40% drop in the Tory vote, so it looks great on the polls, but people are staying at home or electing independents or Greens. I mean, I left the Labour Party in disgust at Keir Starmer's remarks that you all drink scotch. For comic effect only. But if we look at internal democracy in the Labour Party, which will not litigate that, but I think that's a pattern of behaviour. Someone asked me, says, is this McCarthyism? And I said, no, in McCarthyism, you've got a public hearing and a chance to refute the charges. Do voters care about this, though? Well, actually, some do. You've got to look at Ken Livingstone in 2000. Voters do care about politicians fiddling expenses, politicians stitching things up. They do care about democracy. Why? Because most people understand that it's a pattern of behaviour, that behaving in a democratic way is a trait, not a series of isolated incidents, just as bravery or honesty or cowardice or dishonesty are traits. If that is how someone governs now on things that aren't important to the country, that is how are they going to behave when there's important things coming up, which is we're seeing unfolding in Gaza. A Labour government, sadly, and it's with great regret I say this, is not going to fix the million children in destitution. It's not going to fix the 7 million people waiting for an operation in the NHS. It's because they are not going to tackle the thing that needs tackling, which is that the vast majority of our money is part of a wealth extraction model, which takes money out to the foreign billionaires who own our infrastructure, our utilities, our financial models, our outsourced public services. And until somebody does that, there's never going to be the ability to allocate resources that put education, health, welfare, and well-being ahead of the agenda of those who just want to see bank balances rising. Now, what comes after that? That's a discussion for another day. But what's the answer? How do we deal with this? That catch-22 of, well, we need proportional representation, but how do you get proportional representation without proportional representation to vote in the people who want proportional representation? There is an alternative. Local elections. We are seeing more independents, more Greens, more community independents winning across the country. And next May, I'm running again as an independent in the North East. And someone asked me, a journalist asked me, said, Jamie, why are they so terrified of you? Why do they need to block you? I think it's because, this is what the journalist says, it wasn't me. I think it's because you've shown there's a different way to run things. And you've shown it works. And one of the things I'm going to do from May next year is bring the entire transport system back under public control with rail, buses, metros, expanded car club so you can have access to a zero emissions vehicle without needing to own one, bike hire and secure bike parking, free travel for under 18s, and massively increase the people using it so that the emissions fall because there's fewer cars on the road. Now, you get someone wins in the northeast of England next year who shows that they've rejected the Westminster model, but people have voted for it. That's a general election year. What message does that send to our politics? There is a way through. There's always a way through. So let's have a bit more freedom and a bit more democracy. Thank you.